It's Justin Hit here, coming to you live from the middle of my move. So I'm downsizing. I've talked about this in my intentional thrift program, and I'm going to share with you some of the details of incompetence in business. Now, I'm not going to complain about my vendors. You know that there's something not right with the world today and how people are not functioning within their own self-interest. But I have to ask the question sometimes, am I the problem? Am I the reason things aren't working out? So we're going to talk about incompetence in business and how it limits you, the entrepreneur, the high income professional, the manager, how it keeps you from getting the career development, the significance, the results, the authority that you so desire. Now, again, if you have authority in a marketplace, people should just listen to you because you have the experience, because you've put in the due diligence, and you get the results for people. So for example, the last couple of years, I've been documenting the $1 billion in results I've gotten my clients over the last 3 decades. So when you get a little older and you start reflecting on your life and you ask yourself, how have I contributed to my clients over the years? Have I been of value to my clients? You're going to start looking at maybe your resume, and then you're going to take chunks out of your resume and you're going to start qualifying those things, and what was it about that situation that made it so successful? What was it about the results that we did for such and such a client that made it so successful? And so I've written 30, 40 case studies of some of the more significant things that I've done with clients because I was reassuring myself that in the world today, something ain't right. I don't know if it's microplastics. I don't know if it's the glutamates in food, like monosodium glutamate actually gets in the brain and clouds your brain. By the way, if you've ever gone a few days without coffee or tea, you're going to have that withdrawal. And so you're constantly hyping yourself up with amphetamines or caffeine or stimulants, different kinds of stimulants. The amphetamines come in the area of the Ritalin, the medicine they give to people for ADHD. But here's the point. Here's what we're looking at. Something ain't right with people's thinking, and we have to make sure it's not us. So I was just my dad got a travel trailer. He was backing it out into the road. I was spotting on the road, and this black SUV comes up, not a fancy black SUV, but just a normal black SUV comes up. And I won't say whether it's a guy or a girl driving, but the driver didn't even yield. There's a giant piece of equipment backing out in the road, or this trailer backing out in the road. And I'm standing there going, hey, can you see me? And essentially, if I didn't get their attention and slow them down because they were looking at their phone, they would have ran into a brand new travel trailer. Now it's brand new to him. It's not brand new altogether, but it's in that situation. I'm thinking, how can this person be so dumb? So they're not aware of their situation. They would have additional harm to them if they continue down that path, and ultimately they would infringe upon the rights of others. So running into someone else's personal property would be it would be causing harm or infringing on somebody else. And so in that situation, I'm going, why is this person so stupid? Now, again, they could be smart in other areas. They could be, really good in math. They could be really good at gardening. They could be really good at taking care of their family. But at the moment of driving this SUV with cell phone in hand on a residential road, going likely over the speed limit, they were a harm to themselves and others. And so when I say there's a lot of incompetence in business, I have to qualify that and also ask myself, am I the problem? Now, it's very easy to think that you're not the problem. Maybe you think the right way when it comes politically. Maybe you think the right way. So for example, when you look at me, there's going to be certain biases that come up. So I've got a beard. I look older. The beard's a little white. I didn't shave the mustache. And behind me, you can see a big mess. Plus that paneling, 1970s, 1980s at the best. And so there's a lot of judgment that happens. What I'm attributing to incompetence is the inability for individuals to adjust their thinking to more appropriately serve their long-term needs. See, all the results I got for clients before I was there, they did good. And when I was there, I was a catalyst for doing better. Now, how did I do this? I didn't go in there and change them. That nobody wants to be changed. A lot of people want hope, but the people who want hope tend not to do anything. And so they're hoping someone else will solve the problem. And so essentially what I came in is I became the catalyst for specific turnaround and specific changes that created measurable results. See, we need the measurable results to know whether or not our past behavior has contributed to either the problems we face today or the success we have. Now, I have been very fortunate. There is a selection bias in my clients because I have a system for selecting clients. I work with entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs want to do work and they get excitement and fulfillment out of doing quality work. They want to work on a winning team. And so I choose entrepreneurs rather than corporate middle managers. So age demographics is exactly the same. But the entrepreneur or somebody who wants to be entrepreneurial isn't looking for a new job. They want to delegate. That gives them a predisposition to hire a consultant or hire a coach. They want to have measurable achievement. They don't want to just own a corner store and have the excitement of guests coming in and talking with them and stuff. And then, they essentially don't make any money and go broke eventually. And then then they say, well, the town there's a problem with the town because I opened so I'm going to edit a little bit here, but I was a SCORE counselor for a number of years. I did that in Norfolk, Virginia and Martinsville, Virginia. And sometimes people would open stores because it was their passion, but their passion did not include measuring whether or not they're making any money. So they had lots of customers come in, very exciting atmosphere, but when it came down to the coffee they were serving or the Lulu leotard things that they were selling, there was only a momentary excitement that wore off as they struggled to pay the rent, struggled for insurance, struggled to find good employees. And so in a situation like that, I wouldn't even touch them as a client because they don't have enough capital to invest in what is necessary. 75% of small businesses fail because they do not have the capital necessary to operate that business. They got a really good business plan. They've got really good passion for what they're doing. They really love their customers. Maybe even they have the perfect right customer, but because they didn't have the capital strategy, they weren't able to produce the income. So again, when you're in the workplace as an employee, maybe you're a high income professional, you're a subject matter expert, you're going to see lazy, stupid people and counterproductive people everywhere. Everywhere. I see it today. A lot of companies are laying off staff who won't move back into the office. I haven't worked in an office for years. I work in my house. I work in someone else's office. So I'll travel to one particular client I had. I'd be in Arizona for a couple weeks, and then I'd be in Charlotte for a couple weeks, and then the rest of the time I'm in my house. Even when I was working for government contractors, I'd be at Port Wainume, I'd be at a base in Florida, and I'd be, in San Diego. I guess Port Wainume and San Diego are pretty close to each other, but I'd be traveling all over the place, including showing up in places in the middle of the country that are, desolate. And so I always worked from home. So when I see a company saying, we're going to bring you back into the office because we had that COVID thing and everybody started to work from home and they realized how flexible their work time could be, how family life improved, how they didn't have to travel as much. So if you have an environmental interest, you're not spending as much fuel. You're not creating as much pollution. And then all of a sudden the companies are like, oh, we got to get you back to the office because of camaraderie. And then you go back to the office and you are working, still sitting down like we're doing right now on a webinar, and you're still sitting down and talking with people all over the world because that's how business functions today. But again, our perception of these folks might be those are stupid people, but where I come from, and we're going to talk a little bit about this exercise, how you can see yourself from the outside and get a credible perspective of how you make decisions. I can see how the corporate property management is losing their shirts because they've got offices and nobody in the office. And then the credits that they got for building that office was based on the amount of commerce that the people coming into the office would create. And so now the city of Charlotte, the city of New York, all these cities are having issues. But did you know this? This is very interesting. An office building with no people degrades faster than an office building full of people. Now, I know it's hard to believe, but again, we're about thinking differently and then applying those thoughts and perspectives to creating specific and measurable results. But if you've got an office building that's 12 floors and every floor is empty, you could have problems like Wells Fargo where someone dies in the office and you don't find them for 4 days. So what was more expensive, having the office full of people or having a full security team or a full cleaning staff? Think about this. 4 days and cleaning staff didn't find a body. So what's more expensive, the public relations disaster that it is that one of your employees died in the office? Now, again, to be fair, now, not just because they were a client of mine, but if someone died on a Friday during the day and there's nobody in the office, because a lot of folks cut out of the office on Friday, they would have sat from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday. A lot of people cut out on Mondays. So when you have a flexible work schedule, a lot of times Friday and Monday, there's nobody in the office. So we have to be. So when I'm looking at this person driving that car down the road, looking at a cell phone, I can't assume they're stupid. I have to let them prove to me that they're stupid. And so that's really what this is about. So you see lazy, stupid, even counterproductive people all around you. That should actually make you happy. I know I get worked up sometimes, but it should actually make you feel happy because we know now that if you're a thinker, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're looking to solve problems, the world is full of problems to solve. Now, if you're a subject matter expert, you do need to focus on areas where you have expertise and can actually solve the problem. When I go through my work history, my client history, and I'm building case studies and I'm writing stories for my content, or I'm developing a special report or working with a client, I do have to give them some evidence that what I'm suggesting they do can actually be done. And so I can pull 2 or 3 stories because I have experience. You have experience, but you also have to ask when you do that story reflectively. So I've had some situations of bad bosses. They were the inspiration to my course about how to deal with bad bosses and corporate kiss asses. So as your company passes $10 million in gross revenue and you're moving towards that $100 million, there will be certain personality types of people working for you that you've got to be able to recognize and get rid of. Well, those are inspired by some bad bosses. And I was going through some materials yesterday, and I'm not going to use people's names, but there was a gentleman who was constantly writing me about I wore suit and ties to the office. So I'm working on a military base. I'm wearing suits and ties to the office because our client is required to wear a uniform every day. So what uniform was appropriate for my job? So it was either polo shirts and khakis when it's a work day. But when we had to sit in a room with an admiral, or we had to sit in a room with a commander, or we had to sit in a room with some kind of officer, I wore a suit and tie, just like the business development professionals that I worked with every day. But in the mind of my manager, I was just some IT geek. And he expected me to show up in shorts and a t-shirt. But considering that nobody on base, because we're working in the PMO, nobody in our area showed up like that. In fact, I had a pair of coveralls. And by the way, I wasn't dressed much different than the other people in my office. I'd take the suit jacket off. I'd hang it up. I'd put my coveralls on and climb down in the floor to run cables. But this one manager's perspective was that I was a grunt. I didn't know anything. Now, I'd ran a company for years, and I had staff working at other locations, and I was a Unix systems administrator, and I was of the 5 people on base that could do the work that we were doing. And ultimately, his mind was, this young guy, who does he think he is, wearing a suit and tie? Now, what he didn't know is that I had friends that knew the admiral, and I had friends that in my social networking, because very often I would leave the office and build business relationships. My pay rate was of that I could go to the officers, well, I don't know if it's called an officers lounge, but basically they have the enlisted and they have the non-commissioned officers, and I could go to all of the over at the country club where the golf course was. And I would usually go there for dinner because I was meeting friends that I worked with on other contracts. Long story short, what I was through behavior was much different than what he believed me to be as my manager in perception. And that caused conflict. He'd say, and I journal a lot. That's part of the way we manage dealing with incompetent people or stupid people or people that are counterproductive. We journal because if we tell them that, they don't believe that they're counterproductive. But I was reading through some of that last night as I was working on a report about dealing with stupid people and also how to have a stress-free future. And it basically said, so he would ask me, are you going to a job interview? Okay. So I'm in a suit and tie. By the way, he is also in a suit and tie. And these are not dark suits. These are um, just business workwear. It's not, you could have a suit jacket with a polo on under it. It's business workwear. These are not. I did have a couple of really nice wool suits and dark suits and navy suits and pinstripe suits, but I already own these things, so I'm just wearing them. But he would ask me, well, are you going for a job interview? He'd ask me, well, who do you think you are dressed like that all the time? Now, granted, I'm dressed exactly the way he is, but in his mind, he is superior to me. He is my supervisor, and I'm just a peon that works for him. And so I shouldn't have the same clothes as his class. I shouldn't have the same clothes as his category. Now, there was something that, because of the way I carry myself, and we talk about this when we do coaching, the way I carry myself, very often when people would come into the office, they would go to me, or there's another gentleman I worked with, they would go to us first, especially if they had a technical problem. But the supervisor wanted to gatekeep. So when our client, I'm being careful not to use people's names, but when our client, who is a Navy officer, would come in and say, I've got a computer problem, they would go to the people who can solve the computer problem, which is me and this other gentleman, and they would just pull us off of what we're doing. And because we're a government contractor and that's the client, so if it's a civil servant or if it's a Navy officer or it's a Navy enlisted, we jump when they ask us to come do something. And I was supposed to be getting permission from my supervisor because of his self-esteem, because of his feeling about how the world should work around him. And so we have to be very careful that our perception of the world around us, whether it's the political stuff that's going on or whether it's how we interact with other people, isn't getting in the way of our work. So the third party objective view of whether somebody's lazy, stupid, or counterproductive is, does that behavior continue the results that we're looking for? And so in my case, dressing like the client and dressing like I respected the workplace and being an authority in the work that I was doing. And again, I wasn't the star-studded only authority. When things went wrong, such as our software release taking too damn long, the client who is trying to solve a problem goes to the people they believe can most likely solve that problem. And so from my perspective, dressing nice, being respectful, answering questions, and if it was an area that I couldn't solve the problem, I would redirect the person to the person who could. I would bring them to this manager and say, hey, customer so and so is asking about such and such. Can we, I'm passing them along to you. I can't control the other person's behavior. Now, here's the problem, though. Here's the problem, and I will admit it right now, and I've done a lot of work on this, but unmanaged stress, especially brought on by verifiably stupid and incompetent people. Now, I'm not saying this manager was stupid and incompetent. I'm saying that his behavior and perception about the situation actually pushed away these people who should have been asking him questions, but they didn't ask him questions because he's difficult to work with. And so, kind of like the guy on Seinfeld that's in the Postal Service kind of guy. I don't have his name off the top of my head either because I am actively trying not to mention these people's names because, again, when someone is acting stupid, it isn't a defect that stays with them all their life. Just like this, what I'm going to share with you is that the constant being asked, who do you think you are, being told I'm arrogant, being told that I'm overdressing for the part, being asked if I'm going on a job interview. I supported 3 or 4 different labs. These were computer labs. And so I might be in the data center for a little bit, and then I come back to the main office where the bullpen was, and this supervisor say, where have you been? Can you prove where you've been? By the way, we have to use pass cards to get in and out of every space. If he really wanted to know where I was, he would have minute-by-minute tracking of where I was, either on the security cameras or on the badges where we swipe in every space. But I internalized this because my rational brain was saying, I'm working, I'm doing my job, I'm doing the very best I can. And his brain is this guy's out of my sight, so he's probably not working. He could be going on a job interview. So his self-esteem about the position, his perception of, why does everybody keep quitting around me? Because he's kind of a dick. So some of these people in the office, he allowed this. One time, we had a gentleman, he's Chinese, U.S. citizen, on a military base, and extremely intelligent um, scientist. He's a software engineer and scientist. And so we're working in a lab. Um, and he would do a little tea ceremony during lunch. Now, he's not Japanese. It's not a Japanese tea ceremony, but it turns out his parents own a tea import-export out of New York. And he has different teas, and it takes a different amount of time to do different teas. So he had his little timer and everything. And he's having essentially, generically, a tea party every day in the office. And when it was tea time, you don't interrupt him. Now, he brought a sandwich from home, and he'd get his little stackable lunch thing out, and he'd steam up some buns or something, and he's having his tea. And at that moment, I didn't get anywhere near him other than afterwards asking about the tea, because I do collect tea and herbs and different things like that. But he had this whole ritual to relax. Now, there was no cafeteria to go to or anything, so he did this at his desk. And this particular manager overhears people saying, "Oh, what are you having, a tea party?" People were being very disrespectful. Now, Chinese folks drinking tea, there's a misconception that China's all about tea when actually the British were import more tea than China. And actually, as far as per capita consumption, the British and India have higher per capita consumption. But they're literally making fun of this guy because he'd get his little sandwich out. He had this little stackable stainless steel thing, or he had his little bamboo thing going, and he'd heat up his little hot plate. They let us have hot plates in the over next to where the coffee was in the lab. So he had a little hot plate over there, and he'd warm his food up, and he'd open up his little lunch, and he'd get his chopsticks out, and he was enjoying every minute of it. And I don't blame him, because when you can get good quality food, because his wife made incredible food, home cooked food, and your parents happen to own a tea import export, and you're breaking off little bits of tea and making just the perfect cup of tea. By the way, while everybody else was making fun of this guy, I made friends with him, and I got to join his tea parties. Now, he's a senior level engineer, and I'm just a peon old computer techie guy. And we're having I cleared off a space in the back because I did have some control over how the place was laid out. So we cleared off a space in the back and made a lunch table that we did doubled as a conference room table. And so we put the coffee back there, so it was away from the computers and stuff. And long story short, me and him and a couple other folks would sit back there and sip tea, and he'd bring in some English teas sometimes, and he'd bring in some Chinese teas, some white tea, green tea, different types of oolong. And so we sip and cha back in the back. And evidently, some of the managers were getting a little upset because sometimes we did work with with Taiwan, we did work with Egypt, we did work with a couple different countries. And so sometimes when there's an Egyptian military officer sitting back having lunch with myself and this Chinese gentleman and a couple of the other engineers, and the Chinese gentleman just happens to have parents with the import, we were having actual. Now, we didn't have the sand in the tray and doing that kind of tea, but we actually had some Egyptian teas that this gentleman from Egypt happened to be an officer. I wasn't worried about his rank or anything like that. He's a guest. We're enjoying some tea. Long story short, he was super excited. And he told folks that he'd been traveling for months doing this work, and he hadn't been able to have the tea from his hometown. And then this gentleman brought that tea. This Chinese man brought that tea, and we served it and enjoyed it, and he just had the best of time. Unfortunately, again, a lot of these difficult people, it's their self-esteem, it's their frustrations, it's their concerns, and they're going to take it out on the person they perceive to be the weakest in the group. So this manager cannot yell at the Chinese man. They cannot yell at the Egyptian man. They cannot yell at the master level engineers. But this little peon running around fixing computers, the computer repair guy, you can light his ass up. And so I'd end up with my gut would get all twisted up, and then I'd end up with a little rash here and there, and then I would not be able to eat because I just feel overwhelmed, and that was keeping me back. So it was something that I couldn't control that was manifesting into frustration rather than joy, manifesting in distraction and cloudy thinking, manifesting in overeating, manifesting in overthinking. So I'm reading my notes. And by the way, journaling is a powerful way to get those things out of your brain. Now that does happen sometimes now if somebody's being irrational and a complete idiot, and I can get stressed, and it's happened recently after the COVID bit. I guess the point here is what I'm sharing with you is that once you verified somebody's a stupid person, once you verify that they're lazy or stupid or counterproductive or they've got a chip on their shoulder, you need to get away from them and you need to go on and do something else. Because it turns out this gentleman that shall not be named, who very often would harass myself, and evidently he noticed the cleavage on one of the other, turned out to be a client coming in, and he made a big conversation about her breastises. And let's see, what else did he end up doing? He ended up surfing porn in a military base on government assets because we kept finding pornography on some shared computers, and we it turned out eventually nailed down. I guess the point is the reason we get away from these people. Now, I didn't know to do this because I was, this is 20 some years ago. But the reason we get away from these people is because very often their laziness, their stupidness, their counterproductive behavior is a result of something not going right on the inside. Now, again, perfectly productive people can make bad decisions in their home life. A lot of this stuff is compartmentalized. The reason he's surfing porn at work and not at home is because at home he's in a deeply religious household, and his wife probably would have divorced him, or he would have had to talk to the pastor if he got caught at home doing this stuff. Also turned out one of the other managers would watch a lot of gay porn during working hours, and it turns out that's the reason why all the young men in our lab were getting shit on all the time. Now, not literally shit on, but I think that was in some of his repertoire as video to get watched on. But again, what I'm saying here is that when you're surrounded by incompetent people, stupid people, people that cut corners, people who are counterproductive, people that are making bad decisions, we cannot take that upon ourselves because there's all kinds of complex issues and trauma and upbringing and experiences and poor decisions and other things in that person's life that you cannot control. So how is it that I'm able to produce $1 billion over a 30-year career as a business development professional, as a risk management professional, as an IT, we designed networks and stuff in the past. How did I manage to do that? Well, again, if let's say there were representatively 100 projects that make up the composition of that $1 billion, there could have been 200 or 300 projects that just didn't work out. And I have a saying, I like to be on the winning team. And very often, if a team's not winning, I will cut them off. Because again, you can't be on the win. There's a saying, you can't be soaring with the eagles, hanging out on the ground with the turkeys. Okay, you've got to have the control over your own behavior. Now, in this introspection, and when you get past the anger, the fear, the frustration about what Trump's doing or what Kamala Harris is doing or what actually, I talked to a Democrat who supports Kamala Harris. Now, I know that in India it would be pronounced Kamala Harris, and I know that there's other, with language, there's other ways to pronounce, but it has been specifically said that the pronunciation of her name is Kamala Harris. I hear a Democrat that argued with me and said it's Kamala Harris. And so again, should I fight this person and point out the video where the candidate that this other person supports pronounces their name differently? And should I point this out and win this argument, which it turned into an argument very quickly, or should I just say, oh, okay, thank you, and walk away? Because again, people's behavior signals how difficult they're going to be to work with. So if it's a client, I have a client that I sent, we didn't have an agreement up front because I thought I was doing them a small favor, and it turned out to be a huge favor. And so I sent them the details of labor because I had staff come in and do stuff, and they don't know, they think everything went great because we were busting our ass behind the scene helping them save face. And he's like, well, how much do I owe you? And of course, with that question, even though I laid it all out and I gave him rates and I said, you pay what you think's fair. And I'd been happy with whatever he pays. When he says, well, how much do I owe you? I give him a fixed price. And if he doesn't like that fixed price, not a problem. Not a problem. The behavior of the other person has signaled to me where they stand on the spectrum of highly valuable versus complete idiots that I don't want to deal with. And so your customers will always do dumb things, and it's good that they do dumb things because it identifies whether they're going to be compliant, whether they're going to pay on time, whether they're going to be good to work with in the future, whether their company has stability. And so by looking for these signals in the environment, I'm able to do what's called a setup. And this is very important. This is very important. Rather than getting pissed off at the other guy, rather than internalizing their problems, rather than beating yourself up because you're in a bad environment, that introspection helps you say, well, what can I do with this situation? See, in this environment where this guy is giving me a hard time, one of the customers had come to me and showed me an email where this manager is trying to figure out a way to fire me. And so he had asked these other people in no uncertain terms, how do we get rid of this guy? But those customers, I had great relationships with those customers. I was doing good work for those customers. The reason I wasn't in one lab and I was in 4 different labs is because I'm hustling and getting shit done. And the people that I'm working with are in different bullpens all over this base, and I have to drive out to the different spots. But again, it's all, I go up to the Joint Propulsion Lab up in Baltimore, and I was down at Pax River, and then I'm flying halfway across the country. I'm not making these decisions. The client is making these decisions because they trust that I can get the work done, and it's not my responsibility for them to inform my manager, but the manager sends a letter to these people, and more than one person, the program manager, the military client, the Navy client, and a couple other people bring me a copy of this email, and they say, look, what's going on? And I said, I'm not sure. But do you want a big win? And they're like, what do you mean? Well, I've been working on a lead because the $25 million project that I was working on was going to, so my boss is trying to figure out how to fire me. What he didn't know is that the admiral and other people were trying to fire him. See, because when we focus on someone else, even if they're doing good work, and we focus on them overtly, we're gonna narrow our focus. See, that manager was focusing on Justin. What's Justin doing? Why is he wearing a suit? I was taking a dump one time. I had an upset stomach, and I'll tell you right now, because this was years ago, and I didn't have the tools that I had today. I had an upset stomach, and I was shitting my brains out in the bathroom. Literally, I'm sitting on the toilet, pants around and I don't mean to be gross here, but pants around my ankles, okay? Sitting on the toilet. This manager comes in the bathroom and says he'd been looking for me. What the hell am I doing? Get back to work. And then I just let it rip because my gut was all torn up and he was it was already bubbling and I just, I let it rip. And I said, can't you tell I'm using the bathroom? And he just freaked out. You're always in the bathroom. Why is it that you're always in the bathroom? And now I'm an emotional guy sometimes. I'll cry during movies. Band of Brothers. I'm watching Band of Brothers and tears are welling up in my face. Old Yeller. I don't know if I could watch Old Yeller today without a box of tissues. But whatever was going on in his brain didn't connect that I am literally using the bathroom while here. See, when you've got Captain Stupid, don't deal with them. Suicidal Tendencies song about Captain Stupid. You just don't want to get involved because they suck you into their universe. They're like little black holes of idiocracy. And they'll suck you in the universe. But what he didn't know is that the base was going to close that $25 million project, lay off 20, 30 engineers. And I had already been working, I would say in his mind, conspiring with another contractor because we weren't supposed to talk to the other contracting agency. Okay. We weren't supposed to do that. But what my manager didn't know is I was also working for the business development group in the business that we were in. And that's why they'd fly me up for these dog and pony shows. Long story short, I arranged a tour with the admiral. Now, this was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I got let go of that position. Okay? So I'm telling you, I wasn't trying to expose him for being an idiot. I wasn't trying to make him look stupid. I wanted to showcase our successes. I wanted to showcase the great work the engineers are doing. I wanted to showcase the efficiency changes that we made that made that contract worth keeping for the United States Navy and the French Navy and the all the other contracts we're working with. And I wanted to make sure that credit was evenly given, because I didn't know at the time was that this particular manager was blaming a lot of bad things that were happening on me and on the other contractor. And so what the other contractor, because they're executives, these are not like the bosses, these are like the vice presidents and stuff. Their executives approached me about what was going on. And again, a $25 million project in the 1990s is a lot of money. And you don't want to lose that. And so the other contractor approached me about flipping the contract. Okay, because it was up for renewal, and they would have absorbed the engineers, so nobody's losing their job. And so what I ended up doing, with cooperation of the client, with cooperation of the other contractors, with the cooperation of a couple engineers, is arranging a tour with the admiral to see our successes. It's called a showcase. I talk about this in my event management program, where you showcase the successes. The U.S. Navy is ready to push the button and cancel this contract. I have seen $500 million $500 million contracts get canceled at the push of a button. I've seen some crazy ass stuff. Now, it's easy to get to $1 billion when you're dealing with, $500 million contracts and, $100 million in new business and stuff. That's the world I was in. But I'm working for business development in Company A, and Company B's business development has contacted me. I have loyalty to Company A, who's signing the checks. And so we do this showcase, very neutral. The Navy sees that we've got our shit together finally, and they decide to renew the contract. The next day, this jackass manager comes in, and he is livid. So everything that he did, disrespecting female individuals, not being culturally sensitive or understanding the issues. By the way, I did the cultural sensitivity training when we had the Egyptians. I did not attend it. I actually wrote it up, taught it, and brought in subject matter experts to talk about the nuances of Egypt and Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Taiwan, and all the countries that we're working with to do this project. Okay. So again, I can see how an insecure manager could be upset because this computer guy is going around here eating lunch with senior level executives, hanging out at the officers club that he for some reason didn't know. I guess he didn't know he could go there. I didn't understand that. I just walked up there. They checked the colors on my badge and let me right in. I don't even play golf. The other guy played golf. He could have gone and played golf there. He just didn't know it. If you're a guest, it's a lot easier to get in the first couple of times. But here's my point. He freaks the hell out, and he blames all the things that pornography we had. Justin did that. That woman. So evidently the woman who had a bit of cleavage, but it's not something you're going to be looking at when you're in an office in a professional work environment. Evidently she filed a human resources complaint, and he pawned that off on me and this other guy who used to be the other guy's retired Navy. And so maybe we can understand why he might look, but ultimately he just went down this list, and it took me over to the main office, which was down the street, and he fired me, and he just unloaded on me, double barrel. He was just going freaking crazy, and I'm sitting there with the biggest smile on my face, because on my way in there, one of the senior level executives had pulled me aside and says, when so-and-so is finished with you, come and talk to me in my office. Now, he did it in a funny way. Right in front of this manager, and I basically got the picture that I'm just going to let this manager get it out of his system. Okay. Because he was like, who do you think you are? Why would you bring the admiral to our office? That's going to cause us to lose our contract. I knew full well that they got the contract, actually even got extended. Now, because of some of his behavior, they extended the contract with this other company. And, he just went down the line, and I'm just sitting there. Now, I didn't cross my arms and be a dick about it, but all that anxiety and frustration and stomach upset and everything that I had before didn't exist. In fact, I wore my dark suit and I don't know if it wasn't a pink tie, but it was kind of a bright tie, white shirt, come in there with my polished shoes on. And I'm sitting there with this, I maybe had a smirk on my face, but he's going. And then he puts non-disclosure on the table. Then he puts all this legal stuff on the table. And then he threatens a bunch of stuff that I know isn't going to happen because I understand the risk side of this kind of thing. And I looked at him. I said, "Are you done yet?" And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, so-and-so down the hallway, turns out his boss's boss's boss said that I was supposed to go over there and it's getting late. I didn't want to be late." And he says, "Oh, yeah, you go down." Because he thought I was going to get chewed out with this other guy. Okay. And so he wrapped it up. I didn't sign the non-disclosure, never signed a non-disclosure. If you've got a security clearance, there's rules and stuff inside of there. But ultimately, he had some kind of affidavit that I was going to claim responsibility for all this shit he was blaming on me, knowing full well, he's saying I disrespect women. He's saying that I didn't respect the authority of leadership. I had side work. I had all this. He didn't know that it was his own damn company that was giving me the side work. Okay, because I'm busting my ass 80 hours a week on 4 locations, flying all around the country 3 weeks out of every month. I'm fixing shit with this other team of people that are fixing shit, and it's not him giving me instruction of what to do, and which I can understand, but it was his senior leadership. And so I leave the office. I stroll on down. I had to turn in my cell phone and turn in all my laptops and everything. And I wander down the hallway to the senior level executive. And the senior level executive opens that door up and, "What's taking you so damn long? Blah, blah, blah." And then he slams that door. And then he says, "Good theater, right?" Smiles at me. He says, "Sit down. Let's talk." And so he gave me some feedback. Okay, so I was not without fault. Okay, there were a couple things in there that really did upset the manager, because I'm a smart ass sometimes. And for example, the definition of arrogant, you can earn that, and it can be a perception of arrogance rather than the actual arrogance. I was a subject matter expert in what I did. That's why the clients came to me. I did build relationships. I did help people get problems solved, even though it wasn't in my job description. I worked the extra hours. I traveled when asked to get travel, but again, how I was responding, I also did report him to the military base for surfing porn on a government asset, because I knew they already knew, because they came to me and they said, "Somebody in your network is surfing porn. They do it between this time frame. Can you pop by there and see what's going on?" And this manager happened to be, now again, he had his pants on, but he's in there with a mouse on, and I wasn't slobbering, but again, he had a full giant 17-inch monitor full of porn and titties. Okay. Let me get back on track here. I did get feedback from the senior level executive, but I also got a letter of recommendation. He handed me an envelope and said, "Don't open it till you get home." I was not terminated from the company, even though the manager was telling me how he fired me and all this stuff. So I was not terminated. I was eligible for rehire. They wanted me to work out of Crystal City or work out of a different location, though, because this manager had some value. He wasn't, nobody who's a jackass and unproductive and everything has zero value, because if they had zero value, the company just let them go. There's something about that person that's beneficial to somebody. But the point of it is, I got home, opened my envelope up, and there's a high 5-figure check in there, because I saved a $25 million contract. I stayed on task. I focused on building relationships. Government contractors have to work with each other. Their relationship with the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, whoever they're working with, must stay strong. Their relationship with foreign military is important. They picked up a foreign military contract. There's some requirements to get that. The U.S. Navy sponsors it and brings in the contractor. But again, how I functioned, even though I felt, I internalized it and I felt bad, and I had a lot of stress. Now, you're never going to be stress free, but you will be where the stress is a positive motivator. How I responded to the situation was not a positive motivator. I'd get hives and diarrhea and stomach upset, and fibromyalgia would flare up where you get muscle pain. There's a lot of serious stuff that in my 20s I didn't realize was serious. But long story short is, you're not going to change Captain Stupid. There's a reason they're stupid. There's a reason they're doing things, but there's also a reason they're still around. And so I got a valuable lesson that day about not only saving face, but also navigating the very difficult world. Now, if I had to quit early, I was going to quit either way. I would have missed out on what the next opportunity was. And because we sealed this $25 million deal, and because we've got that the client very happy. I got picked up by another government contractor at the program office above, same program, but at the program office, the big fancy PMO building, um, 3 or 4 layers above where I was working before. And I was able to influence a lot of change. Now, I could have been vindictive and got their whole contract canceled, but I didn't, because they really were doing good work. The engineers were really creating results. I did have a couple sessions with human resources, the contacts I made before when I taught the cultural nuances when you're working with foreign militaries, that the engineers needed to follow working with these militaries. Um, let's just say that guy doesn't work there anymore. So whatever reason he was there during my time wasn't valuable enough to be there when you have human resources risk, public relations risks, and other risks associated with being a jackass. So again, will you have to wait a long time before something resolves? Maybe. Will it be emotionally stressful to you? Most possibly. But the stupid people around you everywhere are going to exist whether or not you're productive, but you can't let them pull you down. I think it's Mark Twain that says, never argue with an idiot. They'll pull you down to their level and they've got more practice. I'm pretty much paraphrasing that. But the bottom line is, if you want to create consistent and regular results, if you have subject matter expertise that has value in the marketplace and can bring you prosperity and stability and those things that you want in your own life, if you've got an understanding that something just isn't right, I get excited now. Inflation in the economy, controversial presidential election. We got 2 candidates. Why do we only have 2 candidates? Global issues, sanctions on Russia, but suddenly Russia's economy improves. What's up with that? Inflation impacting cash flow and causing it to be more expensive to start a business these days. If capital is the biggest problem in getting a business off the ground, how do you raise capital? We've raised hundreds of millions of dollars in capital over the years. How do you raise capital for your startup? Now, again, I don't work with startups, so I'll tell you the secret. Partner with, and I did this with a company, and it took just 6 months to get $22 million of business on the table. Now, again, that's the backlog. That's not realized. It took them a couple years to get that 22 million converted. There's whole business development cycles. But the secret is you want to get a couple cash cow customers. So if you're going to do a startup, you want to do a couple cash cow customers with the positioning to get bought out, with the positioning to grow, with the positioning to be a solution in their portfolio rather than a standalone on your own. But again, I don't do startups anymore. The only way I'm going to work for a startup, because I did a lot of .com startups, is if you put $500,000 in my bank account up front that we put in escrow, and then we work off an escrow. Because startups, there's a couple pump and dump strategies that some of my venture capitalist clients used that I'd rather be working for the venture capitalist. I'd rather be working for the Fortune 500. I'd rather be working for someone who's got a $10 million plus company than someone who's starting from scratch, no matter what your experience is or no matter how big your bank account is. The fastest and most consistent way to make to grow $1 million business is to start with $2 to $10 million. I'll just leave it at there. But again, you might look at me and say, well, Justin, you're stupid because my idea is going to go through the roof. But you got to check yourself. So how do we check ourselves? How do we wrap this up? So we see lazy, stupid people and counterproductive people all around us. We see people who are working against their own best interests. We're seeing people who are constantly cutting off their nose to spite their face. Well, in that recognition, we turn that back on ourselves and ask the same. So some of the behaviors that I had, like for example, being a jackass, not being a jackass, I was a smart ass, I guess, sitting on the toilet when a guy comes in and says, Justin, where have you been? What have you been doing? And I said, I was sitting on the toilet. And this is pretty obvious to him, right? Right? It's pretty obvious. And then when he got me all worked up because he started yelling at stuff, you know, I did ease it off to the side to get a good sound out of it. Long story short, though, I could have just said, well, I'll be a minute. I'll be right out. I'll be right out. And then immediately went and found him. What I did is I finished up and then I went off to do the work that I already had planned. I didn't check in with them. Sometimes when people are like that, you need to check in with them. And that does mean humbling a little bit, checking in with them. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be still looking for something else. Because again, we've recognized a behavioral trait. we can look back on ourselves and say, do we exhibit the same? Because most people around you are just mirroring your behavior. We can say, do we exhibit the same? Are we having the same function? If you look at me and you say, that's an old looking guy, he's white, he's got a beard, he's in an old dungeon looking conference room, he doesn't have fancy graphics or overlays or lower third, his sound isn't good, I can hear some clicking on this over here, and so I'm not going to listen to his advice. He probably didn't know what he's talking about. He's not the guru on the mountain in the white robe, because then I'd accept the beard. He's just some jerk off on the internet talking about taking a dump. And I'm not going to borrow any of his advice. Now, I got like 500 videos. You could see for yourself whether that's an accurate assessment of the situation. So if we look at someone else and we're like, God damn, they're effing idiots, we can have an assessment of that, because once you've determined they actually are idiots, you can start the risk management side, which is to stay away from them, which is to check your own behavior, to maybe look for another position. You can start hedging. So I was hedging by working for the business development department of the main company I worked for and making friends in the second company I was looking for, because you always want to be looking for that next thing. See, an entrepreneur, a subject matter expert, is looking for a place to apply the solutions that they know they have that has an increasing amount of value. See, if I just did $1 million jobs, so I started out a computer repair guy, $50 an hour. That manager saw me how I was years before when I was in high school, and it was fixated in his brain because he had some stuff going on. I don't know what it is. It's not my job to diagnose him. But as soon as you recognize that, you can say, okay, how has this person proven themselves to be? And then you can look back at yourself and say, how do I want to be seen? I want to be someone who delivers tangible solutions that are measurable and bankable. Okay, so I'm fixing computers for $50 an hour. $50 an hour, my mom's dropping me off. I'm a high school student. It seems like a lot of money. But inflation adjusted it very often, because I'm paying my mom for fuel. I got computer parts to replace, and sometimes I had to wait on those parts because, again, when you got a giant computer shopper magazine, it's not like it is today. Again, I accept I'm getting old. I understand, but I'm not getting dumb. And so, again, your preconceived notions, your internal bias, those things really do exist. And if we can look at ourselves and say, am I judging this prematurely, or have I objectively looked at the situation? This person's a jackass. Then we have something. So I'm fixing computers for $50 an hour. There are certain types of clients I liked more than others. I love services companies because they didn't have a bunch of techies sitting around messing up the computers. I love the home health services because healthcare tends to be a pretty consistent industry. I love the construction companies and the technical services companies and the companies that focused on serving someone else. And so when they're having a server problem, they are willing to pay whatever it takes to keep that problem from not happening again. And then they had residual work. So I didn't have to be a consultant and camp out at their office because there's always new things to do. That stimulates me intellectually. It gives me new experiences. I might have 30, 40 years of experience working, but it's not the same experience. And when I was 10 years old mowing lawns, that's a different experience than being where I am today. And by the way, I just turned 50. I'm going to put it out there. If recruiters see that and have a problem with it, then that's their problem, not mine. I just turned 50, September 18th, 2024. And that's why I was being reflective and looking at things, and I'm downsizing and just kind of getting things a little bit differently. And we can talk about that in my intentional thrift program. But here's the key thing. Once you've turned that back on yourself, not eating yourself up, not beating being frustrated, not getting an upset stomach. If you notice you start getting an upset stomach, or your perspiration's really bad, or you're skipping meals, you have to say, well, is that my burden to carry? Is that my burden to carry? Okay. And so if we're leveling up the opportunity and we're choosing our battles and we're looking for new opportunity, that's an entrepreneurial mindset. That's a mindset that no matter what the economy does, no matter what the political situation does, you find a solution. So I went from $50 an hour to a couple $100 an hour to $380 an hour to, by the way, I was 20 years old. I was getting $397 an hour. Now, the way I do it today is it's $397 for 15 minutes. And I know not all my clients can afford that. So it depends on whether we're doing a 3-month contract or, we're just going to, you're going to do the work yourself and I'm just going to answer questions in a coaching environment. But the reason we got to $1 billion, now again, I'm documenting the case studies. I'm making it tangible, all of my experiences, so that I can help the hundreds of folks that I help today, not thousands, not 10,000s. I'm not trying to help everybody. I'm not for everybody. But by leveling up your experience, that's only possible when you let go of these external idiots on TV, talking heads on the news, folks in your workplace that are just not helping anything. People who are bad bosses, what I call the corporate kiss ass. When you let that go, you start seeing, well, you know what? If the admiral only knew how great this project was, there's 2 contractors involved with it today. There could be more. Any one of those contractors could hire me to do additional work. I'm going to take the risk of inviting the admiral to come see the great things that we've done recently. Now, that fits in the mindset of an admiral who very often goes and visits showcases all the time. Now, they also show up to fire people and they also show up to see shit that's messed up. But they like it when they see stuff doing the way it's supposed to. And I didn't come in and really so I knew when my boss wanted to fire me, and I knew when the program office wanted to fire him. And so I could have said, well, you want to fire me? Well, you're going to get fired, because I don't know that it's actually going to happen. When you're firing somebody, you have to gather evidence and make sure that you have a legitimate reason. You don't want to end up in a wrongful firing situation. Turns out I wasn't fired at all. I was actually paid extra for getting the contract because I was also working part-time in their business development area. Because I was working in the business development area, they gave me recommendations to go work business development in another company ended up working for. And again, I'm not going to the names of the companies because I really prayed. I didn't do it then. I wanted hell and brimstone. I wanted the guy to spontaneously combust. I wanted him to walk out in front of the propellers of an aircraft or something at the time. But I've matured. And so I've since prayed for this gentleman. I hope he's doing well. If he recognizes himself in this conversation because he's trolling he's not trolling my YouTube channel, but I do have this little fantasy that all the people that have wronged me will find the YouTube channel and they'll be like, damn, Justin is pretty smart. And he helped us solve a lot of problems. And to be fair, out of all of the clients I've had and all of the supervisors have, I can fit on one hand, and by the way, I got a list. I can fit on one hand the bad bosses. But if I got hung up on that experience and I got hung up on that adventure, now so when I tell the story, I've got to convey how I felt at the time, but I've got to also bring you to how you could feel in the future. You could have more control over stupid people. You could have more control over yourself. You could have a stress-free future. You could leverage opportunities to upscale your opportunity. And what do I mean by that? The admiral saw what a great job they did, renewed the contract, and then they put me in the program office. Now, who's they? Well, to get a recommendation from an admiral or to get now again, I wasn't the only one to get the recommendation. I don't want to oversell my value, but I wasn't the only one in the program office. Let's just say beyond that, I was still getting invites from the client to go to the gym with them, and we would hang out outside of work. I don't typically do that, but he was teaching. I like to be around intelligent people that have a bit of overlap in my areas of interest. So I'm interested in martial arts, physical health. It's hard to tell by looking at me that I'm interested in physical health, but I like to eat good. I like to take hikes, and this is not a dating, for the folks that are still on the call, this is not a dating profile. But when I see somebody who does these things and they say, hey, you ought to come out, because this dude was fit. He's like, you ought to come out to the gym with me and I'm going to help get that extra weight off, because I was gaining a little bit of weight being stressed out. And I go to the gym with him and work out, and it is kind of creepy. No, it's not creepy or weird, but um, I did shower with some of my clients, in the sense we were all in the same bullpen showering, but we weren't staring at shit like the manager looking at porn. We're getting our business done and we're getting back out. But it was an environment that most people don't get invited to attend. And I got introduced to people. And then, I was going I was not a member of a couple country clubs, but I was invited to go to these places. That doesn't happen if you're a complete dipshit. But mentally I felt, and so I pray for that manager, because I can relate to feeling less than, or that imposter syndrome, or why are these people keep inviting me to stuff? It's because we had mutual interests. I can see that now. Um, why are they so nice to me when I'm not good enough for this manager? When I'm not good enough for some of the coworkers I work with. By the way, I did not have a college degree. I was working on an associate's degree at the time, and most of the people I worked with had master's degrees or doctorate. This particular manager had multiple doctorates in electrical engineering or something pretty significant. But for some weird reason, I could understand what they were talking about in realms of computer science and realms of radar. And I'm not going to go in why, but ultimately, um, I can understand that imposter syndrome. And so with the reflection, with the journaling, you can start realizing that you're contributing value. I don't know if you've ever had that situation where you felt like in your career, maybe there's just been a big layoff and the company just has dumped you on the street for 10 years, for 20 years. You've been busting your ass for this company. You've been working the extra hours. You've been solving the problems. You've been burying the bodies. So I'm in the risk management world. I know how that is. Sometimes the company's doing stuff that's extremely illegal, and you got to go bury the body, cover it up. You're not necessarily covering it up as much as uh, narrating the story, or developing the supporting evidence for the case that you want, rather than the actual case that happened. I've worked for a lot of Fortune 100 companies, most of the major financial services firms. I've worked for a lot of interesting folks. Here's my point. Have you ever felt that way, that maybe your best of days are gone? That, things are getting more expensive, and you were making six figures, and even 200, a friend of mine had a job, 200 and some $1,000s a year. Suddenly he doesn't have a job anymore. Laid off, let go, bad blood, industry collapses, 2008. A lot of friends of mine, top pay in the mortgage industry. Some of them haven't recovered. And so what we're talking about here, and again, we can go into this in coaching uniquely bespoke to your situation, but in the generic form of it is that the control you have over your own mind, the connections you're able to make, the underlying nuances of driving down and getting results. I've had to fire clients before. I've had to fire myself. Actually, now, 50 years old, I'm looking at my life and saying, I don't need a 3,200 square foot house. And I'm going to try, we talk about this someplace else, but I'm going to try to see, because I like traveling. I love traveling to different locations and supporting clients. I'm also now more into agriculture and homesteading type stuff. And you can see that by some of my other channels. But really, this is a call to action on turning the lens back on yourself, because it doesn't matter what the world's doing out there. Now, there are times it will impact you. You can't be naive. You have to look at your situation. You have to fully understand what's going on. You have to develop an underlying perspective so that you can do the right thing even when the whole world around you is falling apart. And many learned that in COVID, and they got canceled, and some of them took that back upon themselves the hard way. And the reason I'm giving you this training here, and I want to make sure you have this training, and we're going to publish it online. So if you see this, you can put comments below. I'm giving you this training because again, you can't control stupid people. You might have an innate desire to want to control stupid people. Oh, and I forget you guys can't see my screen. Okay. I'll just give you a little sidetrack here. And let me see if I can read this without disclosing. Um, okay. So I have somebody I just told, I sent him a itemized invoice. This was supposed to be a personal help. I don't mind helping a friend. Turns out he took advantage of the situation, and purposefully or non-purposely. I'm not saying that he on purpose did it. There could be a gap in perception, and maybe because he's always hired staff before, he didn't know how much time is going to, again. And so he said, hope it didn't upset you. Please let me know how much I owe you. And then I gave him a number, less the amount of money he paid in cash at the party, because he did hand me what looked like he was trying to give me a tip. But again, I said that's money off the top. And then, by the way, I have a farm and I have some farm hands and stuff, and we were doing this type of thing. And then I told him I sent you an email with all the details. Now he says, I never saw the email. Never saw it. So please send it to this email address. It happens to be the same email address I sent before. And please break down the hours and the cost per hour. So I'm going to forward the email, and I'm not going to break it down. I don't even care if the guy pays me. Now, if he sees this video and decides he's not going to pay me due to that, it tells me what kind of person he is. If he pays me more, it tells me what kind of person he is. Do you see how this works, folks? So the lazy, stupid people, the people who are counterproductive, the people who can't get out of their own way, they are showing you the context of their character and who they are, and now you know. What I love about technology today is that these politicians get up there and they will lie in your face, but the video doesn't lie. Now with AI, it can lie. So you have to be careful. There's a whole nother level to this that we work on in coaching. And then we also work on perception management, because sometimes you're the problem. And so, how do we adjust the perception, do the public relations necessary to position you as an expert in the marketplace? Maybe you're going from having a career where you work for somebody else to being an independent consultant. And so how do you make that transition? And I've mentioned the cognitive biases. There are some that I counter. So when you see me on camera, I got a monitor over here so that I can see that I'm looking into the camera, because I don't always make eye contact with people. And a lack of eye contact is a body language signal that something might be up. So if I'm looking over here like this, I look a little shady. If I'm looking over here on this screen, I'm looking a little shady. And so I try to have my monitor up so that I typically look at the camera. And we can work on these things. I can coach you. I can show you from examples on how to create results. I also collect experiences from others. Reading biographies is the best way to understand that every person you admire, they have faults, they have successes, and they have areas of setback. And they overcame all those things and developed the narrative that you now see and believe today that defines them as a person publicly. Doesn't mean that they don't still have issues inside. I'm not your therapist, okay? I will recommend a therapist if your behaviors indicate that you ought to have one or might consider one. I'm not going to fix your marriage. My core area of expertise is fixing the cash flow in your company. And how I do that is develop additional business that's complementary to what you're already doing. You don't need additional work. You need additional business without the additional work, without the headaches, without the stress, without the frustration, without it ruining your home life and family relationships, without all the challenges that we have today with regulations. And so that's where the risk management side comes in. And so if you've got a $10 million plus company and you want to grow it to $20 million, $50 million, even $100 million, I have done that before and can, for your situation, develop a plan. That's where all these plans come from. Okay. So when I hire a bunch of staff this one says optimize your YouTube channel. And by the way, I say optimize your YouTube channel, but it's really about getting profitable customers. Everything's down to profitable customers. Your behavior manages how you interact with the world, but doing so gains you profitable customers of which you serve. And now you manage other people's behavior. And so the other people do all the work. It's not always the case. There is a period of startup, but ultimately, if you're going from an established career, time in the marketplace, I see that just as valuable as having a company that's 10 million, 20, $30 million company. And now I've worked with Fortune 100s, but when I work with a Fortune 100, I'm working for a $22 million division of that group, or a program office, or a the chief administrative office or something like that, which could be just $100 million, could be just $20 million. Um, the big problem I have with startups is if you're starting from scratch and you're 20 years old, that's not the best person I want to work with. I want to work with somebody in their 30s, their 40s, somebody with a little bit of experience in the workplace, somebody who's invested in their subject matter expertise, not somebody who wants to learn the latest thing of like, so I show this Optimize YouTube, and sometimes people come up because they want to become a YouTube creator. They want to be a YouTube famous. And that's not what this is about. This is about YouTube as a marketing channel that produces residual value of new and qualified prospects coming to your website, which your website is a channel, coming to your direct mail, coming to whatever the systems. So we're developing systems. So what I've shared with you here today is a system to check your own behavior to make sure you're not the baddie, and then to convert the frustrations, the irritations, the stress associated, because stress response is a signal to your body. It's kind of like if you had a meter. No stress is just as dangerous as having high stress. No stress makes you, and the old saying that good times make weak men make bad times, is because when things are really good, we make some mistakes. When the economy is really good, it's a lot harder to know that whether the business growth is because of the economy or the business growth is because of you. That's the setup thing. I want to get you on the trend or the path, but I also want you to have the foundation so that your rocket doesn't fall over. I guess that could be an old guy reference too, but the point of it is, I've grown businesses in bad times where every penny matters and every customer must produce. That's why right now, bad times, this guy asking me for a personal favor, I delivered the personal favor. Turned out he needed much more than a personal favor, but I sent staff home and I worked that job because another person that was there was working that job too and kind of got stuck in the same situation I did. So integrity, character, I want people with that integrity, character that tends to come with experience. But if he doesn't pay, then I'll still pay out my guys. Okay. So at least if I get enough money to pay out my guys, because my guys are helping me haul hay and put up fencing and, take care of animals. I'm going to make sure my guys are taken care of. But ultimately, the last thing I want to leave you with, if you ever crosses your mind about that dumbass idiot, that person, you've got to stop, qualify it. Is what they're doing counterproductive to their intended outcomes or results? When you see the companies laying off people today because people won't go into the office, the people aren't going into the office because going into the office sucks. It's horrible. It costs you extra money. It causes your living expenses to increase. Today's technology lets me serve people all around the world. People on this call today. And again, I'm not sharing the desktop. I got a little script here. But people right now watching this, tens of thousands of people are watching this. I didn't have to go to their individual homes and talk to them individually. Okay. If you want to talk to me individually, if you want to do coaching, you want to do a consultation, I've got mechanisms to do that, but I still don't come to your house and sit down with you at the table like an old insurance agent and have a conversation with you in your home. Yet I'm still in your home using technology, using the headset, using whatever environment I happen to be in. Now I'm going to make sure I'm in a quiet environment that's conducive to what we're doing. But ultimately, we're in a different world. We're in a different world. So when you quantify that situation and these people are calling you into the office and saying you have to work into the office, and you didn't come up with the concept that maybe their real estate values are going down and it's more expensive for them to have a building that's empty than a building full of people, then you haven't yet got the mindset, and we can help you get that mindset to be able to solve some of these problems. So you want to go back and look at yourself and say, why am I getting work? Well, if you ask yourself, why am I getting worked up about something? You're going to challenge your capacity. It's like, where's the profit in this? Does getting worked up about this help me? And so we're judging our own behavior. It's more of a stoic approach. And then you can say, you know what? Dealing with these dum-dums in the office, I can do it for a couple more years, but I ought to be able to find some passive income. I ought to be able to set up, in my case, downsize to a homestead. Turns out goats are really relaxing. Now the goats are relaxing because I could just sit there and lean on the fence. Now these old guys used to do this all the time, and I used to think these old guys are lazy, but these old guys are thinking while they're watching the goats, or they're feeding the cows, or they're looking at how the grass is growing beautifully. And there's some personal now that's not necessary for you, but for me, there's personal satisfaction that goes far beyond what I need to worry about. So maybe in your position, you can start sifting and sorting. You're going to sort out the dum-dums. You're going to sort out the lazy people. You're going to sort out the stupid people, because in bad times, those people don't create results. Now you're going to hedge yourself against them. And we talk about that in other programs, because stupid people do stupid things. And I'm not going to get into the nuances of COVID. I'm not going to get into the nuances of heavy regulations. I'm not going to get into the nuances of things, but you can see in your life when you have too many dumb people around you, that often you either become dumb and you fall into that groupthink, or something bad's going to happen. And so again, if you take anything away from our discussion today, it's you're the sum total of the people around you. And if you realize you're surrounded by idiots, you might be one of them. But the beautiful thing, the blessing, because I know some of these people might be praying for you. Just like I prayed for that manager. I got that. I did. I'm not doing this to sound pious, but it is better to pray for your enemies than to become one of them. And so there's somebody praying for you right now. And if you could catch that and you say, look, you know what? That dumb thing they just did, I do it sometimes too. And it annoys me. I bet you it annoys other people. So I'm going to do something different. Now, you don't want to try to replace what you're doing. You don't want to try to stop what you're doing as much as replace what you're doing. On my birthday, I made some cake disappear. Okay. I shouldn't have done that. There's other things that I enjoy eating, like fruit, that would be just as satisfying. They wouldn't have the calories. They would have more fiber. It would, again, if there's one thing you take away, is it's so much easier to change yourself. I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. I'm a different person. I've learned from the stupid things I've done. I've increased the opportunity. I've created passive and other forms of multiple streams of income. I've done the things that I'm advocating today, and what I hope, because what's incredible about this, I'm not even, thorium reactors and reusable rockets and artificial intelligence. I'm not even going to hype about that kind of stuff. Just the fact that I don't need to travel all over the country unless I want to. So if I ended up doing a project for somebody, because I started doing this over the last probably 10 years or so, a little bit harder after 9/11, but when I went to a location to work, Chandler, Arizona, I go to Chandler, Arizona. I got a list of places. I want to visit ASU. I want to visit, there's some agricultural stuff that goes on out there. I want to go look around and see how the desert biome is different than the temperate climate. I want to, man, I basically padded out the weekend. So I worked the week, and then I came back the next Monday. Usually flights are cheaper on Monday. And so I got to enjoy that a whole weekend. I had a rental car. I got to do all the things I wanted. But sometimes I might even just sit in a hot tub or a sauna and wander around in a towel all weekend. I don't know. Maybe that comes with age. You just got to do whatever you want. Dress however you want. But again, that's freedom that can be conveyed if I'm not worrying about that dum-dum that cut me off in traffic, or that idiot that I had to deal with back at the office, or the situation where these new tax policies are going to kind of wreck everything up, or the delta in which government needs to be turned around. And so let me leave you at that. Let me just wrap up. I don't see anything in the chat. I want to thank you guys who are on the call today for being on the call, kind of short notice. I'm going to do more of these calls, though, because I have a place I can put these where not everybody can see them. But again, I want the public to see this, because their biases are stopping them from getting results. Their projection, their worry, their frustration. Boy, I covered a lot in today's call. And so I'd love to hear your comments below. If you think I'm an idiot, tell me. That's okay. I like the trolls. I can shut down any troll conversation. And then, of course, if you're being honest and you're contributing, and you've got, like that vice president, you've got feedback for me. See, the feedback that guy gave me, even if I didn't get a giant check when I left, It still was useful. It's like I got paid twice. Oh my gosh, there's so much that we could be working on. Again, if you need help and you want a coach to talk about these things and you qualify, and you can contact me on a case-by-case basis, or if you just want more podcasts about these kind of topics to help you level up, you're going to subscribe to this channel and you're going to visit www.insidestrategicrelations.com, because that's our newsletter site around building influence, establishing credibility in a marketplace or authority in a marketplace, developing that inner strength that helps you overcome. So again, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this. And because of the magic of technology, I want to thank you for watching today, as this will be out there forever working on my behalf, helping to share the good news of dealing with stupid people. And again, if you've got stupid people in your life, what a blessing. Imagine all these dumb people around you, all these counterproductive people, and you not notice, okay? Again, but also congratulations on cultivating the new experience, which will be the prosperity, the success, the well-being that you're going to have here and in the future. Thanks for watching. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations.